put yourself in the position to win and do whatever it takes to get there, you will be rewarded. Life will reward you. And this is actually an amazing example of that.
It takes time. That's the thing too. People sometimes want shortcuts. They want to just do something. I'm passionate about this. They just want the next day. They want something to happen. I've seen crypto come and go. I've seen, now AI. I saw Web3. When you follow your bliss, follow your passion, you do it independent of everything else. You don't need the money. You don't really need it. You don't really need any of the, kind of classical things people think about in success, like money, power, these things. You do it because you love it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Wealth podcast. Today I have Kian Sadeghi, the founder of Nucleus Genomics. We're going to talk about the extremely cool company he's building. We're going to let him riff on some of the different areas where this company will be successful, will help people, and also just talk about the current landscape of the industry. Genomics is definitely more scientific than my typical guest and my typical conversation. So I'm going to do my best to not sound like an idiot on here and try and get him to explain everything going on for the normal person listening. Kian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
So I want to lead it off with, you started this company from a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
You had a personal situation that came up. That was what got you interested in genomics. What was that time in your life like, and how did you start to kind of dive into that world?
Well, so just to, kind of take a step back, I'm a first generation American. Both my parents are Persian. They escaped Iran during the revolution, came to America, specifically Brooklyn, where I was raised. As you allude to, my cousin, unfortunately, she went to sleep one night and she didn't wake up the next day. She died in her sleep. Around that time, also, my uncle actually, unfortunately, passed away suddenly as well. I was young. I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I just asked my dad, who's a doctor, I said, Dad, how does this happen? And he said, bad genetics. I said, what does that even mean? Eventually, I became very interested in genetics. I started basically realizing that disease isn't really an inherent property of human beings. Said differently, it shouldn't be kind of just, left to chances on whether you die or not. So I actually joined one of the first do-it-yourself gene laboratories in the country. It was actually in Brooklyn. Literally in like a closet, and we engineered yeast to make them illuminate. We would, engineer bacteria to make them resistant to antibiotics. And I started realizing that, there was this kind of beauty and depth to biology, but it wasn't very iterable, right? In the wet laboratory, if you're dealing with the pipettes in the laboratory and you make a mistake, forget about it. But on the computer, everything was so iterable. So I want to kind of combine the, I would say, beauty of biology with the iterability of programming. And so I went to UPenn to study computational biology. Let's just say I wasn't there long, a year and a half. And then one day I was sitting in literally, Bio 221, which is genetics class. And the chairman of the biology department brought up what is my favorite chart in the world, the decreasing cost of sequencing a human genome. So your DNA is like 1,000-page book. It used to be around $100 million to read all 1,000 pages. At the time in 2020, it was just $1,000. Think about that. Wow. So I said, okay, well, this price is going towards zero. I have to build the application layer for DNA. And 5 years later, that's what we've done.
That's amazing. And I'm sure as a young adult, like being in high school, being geeking out and obsessed with biology and being in that lab, I'm sure you were somewhat of an outlier. If I had to make that assumption. How was it like at that time in your life, and how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think definitely in high school, I was unusually interested in science, specifically biology. I think I actually had a 100 average in biology, and I took too much pride in that probably at the time. And so I, I think, there's a program in my high school. It's called Science, Research, and Design. And a lot of my fellow classmates, they would do research in things that were frankly kind of stupid. Does sugar affect your ability to, get an A? Does height, affect how fast you run? Things like this. And I remember going to the program thinking to myself, I want to do something. I want to do, quote unquote, real science. I didn't even know what that meant. I'm not even sure if I still know what that means, honestly, but I want to do, quote unquote, real science. And so I remember there was a guest speaker and he spoke about this gene editing device, CRISPR. And it's actually interesting because I really feel as if, throughout my entire life, there were little peaks of curiosity. And what I did is I went one step further than anyone. So, this guest speaker comes in and he says, hey, look, there's this new gene editing device. It's called CRISPR. And CRISPR, is basically a long acronym. It actually stands for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. Woo! Still got it. Still got it. It refers to the bacterial immune response system in case the audience cares. And basically it can be harnessed to, engineer and correct different mutations in DNA. Wow, Andres, you're pulling this out of me. I haven't spoken about this in a long time. And so I remember thinking to myself, wow, that sounds so cool. You can engineer DNA. I have to get into this. And so I actually emailed 20 scientists at the time. And every scientist basically ignored me or said, "Are you crazy? There's no way I'm letting you into my lab." And because I was in high school, I was probably like 16, 17, who knows. And so I said, "Okay, well, I needed something. I need to find something." And so I found a this DIY gene editing laboratory, and I joined it. But they actually didn't let me join it actually because you had to be over 18, but I wasn't over 18. So I recruited my science teacher, who she's listening to this podcast, Miss Savkovich, over a lot. She's an amazing teacher, did a lot for me, really, helped kind of cradle my interests and my curiosities. And so we went, Ms. Sefcovic and and I literally, actually, it's funnily enough, because speaking about being an outlier, at this laboratory, which again is more like a closet than a lab, we there was a Wall Street Journal reporter. So a Wall Street Journal reporter actually came in and said, "Huh, what is this? 17-year-old kid doing engineering? Yeast and bacteria, whatever." And that ended up being one of the main stories in the Wall Street Journal healthcare section at the time. So there's a picture of me in an AC Milan uniform, for those soccer, basically with a pipette, engineering different organisms. So in a weird way, it was sort of a foreshadow what's to come. I mean, what's interesting about CRISPR is, obviously it's genetics related, and I think that it was exactly kind of an encapsulation of me following my curiosity to kind of the next level, and then me actually creating, going from kind of thinking and imagining to actually doing things in the physical plane, and to for some really real extent that somehow I think kind of that experience of following my bliss and then doing something I love is sort of teed up, I think, Nucleus. So
That's crazy. And I like how you mentioned that you were kind of foreshadowing the success. Like, what are the odds that
I
you
know,
pull all of these strings to get into that one small lab? The day or one of the days that you're there, there's a
I
reporter
know.
and you're one of the main topics. Like, that, that's a unique scenario right there.
It is, and it makes you think that you have to, believe in destiny or something, right? Because at the end of the day, you reflect back and, it's kind of like the old Steve Jobs quote, you can't connect the dots forward, but you can connect them looking backwards. Because sometimes I still think about that, what were the odds, to your point, of in that moment at that time, I'm at this lab and these things happen. But also to some extent, if something's meant to be, the universe will, close its eyes, close its ears for you. And you have to go after it. You have to follow that burning fire in your soul. And if you do that, you'd be amazed at how much the world responds. It's almost a law of physics, where if you give something your entire being and you're authentic to your soul, the world responds and it starts bending to your will.
I actually couldn't agree with you more. And I've now had the chance to interview over 100 founders. And one thing that I've noticed in a lot of those conversations is in life, the average person gets tons of opportunities to be successful, but they typically don't see them because they're not open to them. They're not looking for them. But in your case, someone like you who did everything right, found something you were passionate about, and 9 out of 10 people would have quit after 20 scientists told you
Oh, yeah.
to leave them alone, not use their labs. The other 9.9 people would have quit when they said you weren't old enough to even get into this DIY lab. You went out of your way to do whatever it took to get into that lab. So I feel like you're so right on, like, if you really do put yourself in the position to win and do whatever it takes to get there, you will be rewarded. Life will reward you. And this is actually an amazing example of that.
And it takes time. That's the thing too. People sometimes want shortcuts. They want to just do something. I'm passionate about this, and they just want the next day they want something to happen. If you think about Nucleus, for example, I've been going this for 5 years. 5 years. Every day. Dropped out of college. No joke, man. I've seen crypto come and go. I've seen, now AI. I saw Web3. I saw, I know founders now. They've started 2, 3 companies in the 5 years that I've done the same thing, right? So that's the thing too. When you follow your bliss, follow your passion, you do it independent of everything else. You don't need the money. You don't really need it. You don't really need any of the, kind of classical things people think about in success, like money, power, these things. You do it because you love it. And then in loving it, everything else falls into place. So sometimes people optimize for the wrong thing, especially if you're young, you're a 20-year-old or something. And so that's why I think, if I was listening to this podcast and I was, whatever, 20 years old, you really have to remember that these things take time, and that knowledge and experience and going at something compounds over time. So, if you're on your 5th year doing the same thing, that is far more valuable to the world than if you're on your 5th year and you've done 5 different things, right? That's something I think that's often missed. And also another thing that I would say is that a lot of people think, oh, AI is replacing all the ideas in this world. There's gonna be nothing left. AGI is gonna replace it. I do not think. I think that is so off, so fundamentally wrong, and does not understand that technology is one thing, productization is something else entirely. So if anything, this is probably going to be one of the single greatest opportunities for, if you're young and you're hungry, in history. In history, the second greatest time was in 2000 during the internet revolution. The AI revolution is probably going to be even bigger than that.
I, again, literally could not agree with you more. I've had that conversation over and over again where it's like, oh, AI is going to replace this, AI is going to replace that. I do not think, and even with the internet boom, I do not think that there is a better time than right now for anybody to create the company that they want,
Hell yeah.
bring the idea they thought of to light. And if you are not doing that, if you are not pursuing that, that is a shame on you. You are being selfish because you are not giving the world everything that you are capable of. And I think that's extremely unfair from your side. So I love that idea and that thought. And I do agree that we are living right now in the single best opportunity for entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs that want to go out and build amazing products and bring ideas from 0 to 1.
Agreed.
Obviously you dropped out of college like you mentioned, and not a small college. You were at UPenn. you I know the typical immigrant story of your parents want you to go to school, get a degree, get a good job. Your dad was a doctor. So what did that look like, trying to explain to them, hey, I am going to leave school and follow my burning passion and try and build something out of this?
Yeah, that would be, fantasy land. It's not how life works. My parents said, "No way in hell." They gave me an ultimatum. They said, "You either go back to school, or stay in school." Right? Because I said, "Hey, this is during COVID now. I said I want to leave school. They said either you stay in school or you work in a lab with a professor." And then I said, "Okay." And so I actually programmed a fake email from professor, and I showed it to them. And let's just say I worked 12 hours a day for a year, because I was busting my ass to make sure that whatever I had, envisioned was going to happen. Because let me tell you, I said to someone recently, I said, I only fear God and my parents. It's 2 things I fear, right? That's it. But no, in all seriousness, my parents did not even know what I was doing for the entire year, because I know would have destroyed them. So I had to lie, and I actually wrote a whole essay to myself. It was titled "The One Man Revolution." The essay I outlined why I'm going to lie to my parents and follow my bliss, and how it's actually funny. Maybe one day I publish the essay. The essay actually talks about how whenever I followed my bliss in my life, the good things happened. But whenever I borrowed someone else's brain, bad things happened. So actually, Nucleus started out as a sort of the ultimate manifestation of me following my bliss. It was basically the highest agency decision I made at that point, for entirely on my own. I would say, I'm going to do this thing. Everyone else be damned, even my parents. And I love my parents. They've done so much for me. But at the end of the day, at some point, the bird has to leave the nest. You got to fly on your own. And so I, created this email, lied to them, and I just got to work, man. It was extreme stress, extreme pressure. But, I tend to do really good in those situations. I love stress. Bring it the fuck on, baby. Let's fucking go. So yeah, so that's kind of the story there with the whole immigrant parent situation.
Yeah, and that's hilarious. And I hope you do go out and publish that essay. Please tweet it or at me in any way, I want to read that because I think that's a super cool moment. And it just follows what we've been talking about up to this point on like, you are doing whatever it takes to be
Got
successful.
to do what it
So
takes.
I'll be damned if you're not going to make it. And obviously 5 years later here, we're having this conversation. We're not going to call it a complete success because the mission's not done, but from where that individual was, the version of you that dropped out of college to where you are now, there's been huge
Oh
strides.
yeah.
Obviously, your parents know
Now
that
they
you
know.
dropped out of college and have built this awesome, amazing company. And I know for you, a pivotal moment was when you raised that first 100,000.
Yeah, it was.
Something that stood out to me, because I've talked to founders that have raised $10,000, $10 million. You raised $10,000 with no employees, just by yourself, off of your idea and your mission. That to me is extremely impressive. One, how many at bats did it take, and how many no's? And how'd you get that person to trust you?
Yeah. So during that year when I was building, I filled in 18 subject notebooks. During that time, I would talk to investors here and there. I didn't even understand the concept of investors. Every single one said no. I don't think I've ever actually said this publicly, but in the very, very early stages of Nucleus, before I would probably not even in one notebook, much less 18, I actually applied to Y Combinator. They said no, which, whew, what a missed opportunity there. They don't want to return the entire fund, I guess. That's okay. Um, so then a year later, I remember there was a tax program at the time. It was called First Tax, where shout out to Corey Levy, our first investor, the best investor, best seed stage investor in Silicon Valley. I said it here first. He had his phone number, technically actually his second phone number up online. And so I texted it cold and I said, "Hey, my name's Kian." This actually text is online already. I say, "Hey, this is Kian, and I'm building this thing, called Nucleus." And so he says, "Okay, call me." I said, "Okay." And let's say, whatever, a week later, we get on the phone. Well, actually, a week later, I call him. He gives me a time. He's like, "Okay, 3 p.m., whatever. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm walking around Brooklyn." I said, "Okay, it's 3 p.m." I give him a phone call. He doesn't answer. And I said, "God damn it, these motherfucking investors are such assholes. They're just bullshit. They all bullshitters." And then he called me. He sent me a text a couple hours later. He said, "I'm so sorry I missed your phone call. I don't know, I have two phones or something, crazy shit. Can we actually, hop on the phone again?" So I said, "Okay." So I go to my basement and I call him. And I remember it was the most garbled pitch ever. Nucleus is, it's like fucking, it's like 1,000 hours, just fucking coming out at Corey. And I remember him just pausing and he goes, "So it's a better 23andMe?" I said, "Yes!" Exactly. Then I thought, maybe I should just pitch like that. And then he said, "Okay, let me introduce you to a partner of mine. Introduce me to somebody in Orlando." And then a day after, they say, "Okay, we're in for $200,000." And that's a talent bet right there. Listen, you gotta make talent bets. That's all this business is at the end of the day. There's like the meme with the normal distribution, the stupid
Yep.
person, smart person, that's like the middle. You know, Stupid person says it's the founder, god damn it. The smart person says it's the founder, god damn it. In the middle, it's the market, the this, the that. Nah, bro. Founder. That's it, founder. So it's like kind of like I'm gonna steal this from Jeff, but there's three rules of real estate: location, location, location. There's three rules. There's three rules of investing, or VC investing: founder, founder, founder. So location, 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 founder, founder, founder. That's it. And it's actually really real because you can't ever change the location of your home. Obviously, similarly, no matter what about everything else, no matter what the furniture is, et cetera, you can't change who the founder is. You can't change its inherent essence. So you're investing in that, especially in the seed stage. So they came in, and then in September 2021 or October 2021, the Founders Fund, Peter Thiel's fund, led the first round. So that was the first institution that came in. Then a few months left, Alexis Ohanian, founder of Reddit, came in. And so that at that point was around $18 million that we'd raised. So thinking about me, going from not a pot to piss in, literally, and no money, no network, no college degree, no formal genetics training, nothing. And now, imagine the discipline and determination and passion I had without any money Put money on there, it's like gasoline on the fire. It is going to fly. And that's what's happened. I mean, we're on a tear. It's tear season at Nucleus. We're just getting started. That's the most beautiful thing. We've launched, the first end-to-end genetic testing analysis, clinical grade whole genome product, combine over 70,000 genetic tests into one. We screen with one swab. We screen for over 800 conditions. It's the most advanced DNA health test ever created, on the backs of one of the greatest technological decrease in cost ever, which is the decrease in cost of sequencing the genome. So when you create that in your mind, and then once you create that from your mind, it actually came into the world. So sometimes when I entered the Nucleus office, I see it. I'm like, wow, oh my God, it's the logo, and I can see myself in my bedroom, imagining it. So that is what entrepreneurship is really about. It's about the alchemy. It's about the creation. It's about going to the depths of your soul and pulling it out of there. If you do that, all the answers are already inside of you. You don't have to go anywhere else. Everything's there. So I think as a 20-year-old, when you hear this, what's the tactical advice? The tactical advice is you already know what you need to do. That's it. You actually know. If you always know. It's easy to make excuses. Oh, my mom said this, my dad said this, my teacher said this. Oh, my best friend's doing this. But you have to listen to that little soul. You have to listen to that voice in your head. If you do that, you'll make it much farther than anyone else. Trust me.
Dude, well, one, there's so much to unpack with that, and an extremely powerful statement. Before we dive in and talk more deeply about Nucleus and what you all are building, I want to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
You say founder. You say the initial investors made that bet on you. Why do you think they bet on you? What about you do you think made them write a $200,000 check?
I think that when you put your heart into something, you give everything you can, people feel it. One analogy I think that they give here is like, let's say the game of basketball. Everyone knows basketball, right? I can go on, I don't know, 3rd Street in Brooklyn, and I can watch, someone play basketball. Okay. They're okay. And let's say I don't know anything about basketball. I know you put the ball in the hoop. That's all I know. And then, I go watch I'm obviously in person. I go watch the top recruit, at Duke or something in the country play basketball. I go, oh my God, this guy is good. Everyone's had this moment when they're watching a sports player where you watch someone live, you're like, what the hell? He's like, what? This person's so good. It's the same sport, right? It's the same sport, but not something about it. Everyone can see with their 2 eyes. But even if they don't know basketball, they don't actually understand how basketball, the game, plays. They feel it. So a coach might go, this person's amazing for X, Y, Z reasons, right? But you actually don't even need to know that much. Everyone just knows this person's amazing. So the analogy here with entrepreneurship is similar, where, in the same way that the number 1 recruit from Duke playing basketball, you can't fake playing basketball that well. It's impossible. I can't go and just, start dunking the basketball. It's impossible. In the same way, the kind of quality of talent you're dealing with, the best investors can actually spot it. So unlike in basketball, where everyone can see it, because it's pretty clear if someone's exceptional at a sport, it would in kind of more academic disciplines or disciplines like entrepreneurship, where it's not as physical, it's a little bit harder to spot. But if you're trained, you can actually see the person with that experience, with that insane work ethic, with that talent. You can actually see that where no one else can. So in other words, when you say, what do they see? It's almost like, how could they not see it? Because you're talking about someone dropped out of school, talking about someone who has gone to the nth mile. You're talking about someone who is hyper fluent in genomics. I mean, perhaps the most knowledgeable 20-year-old in genetics in the world, literally. You're talking about someone who very clearly is going to go to the nth mile to get the job done. Okay. You're talking about someone who has intentionally, but still thoughtfully, basically just did not listen to their parents, which is always a good sign for an entrepreneur, someone who's kind of very independent minded. You're talking about these unique collection of traits. It's sort of like watching, some sort of D1 athlete, dunk the ball and then shoot a 3. Of course you're going to invest in that. And so it's a little bit hard because, people sometimes look at founders and be like, okay, there's two people sitting in a room by themselves. I can't really, like, how could I possibly tell who's going to succeed? But if you can train your taste, and the best seed stage investors do this, the moment that you start talking to someone, it almost pulls you out of the chair. That's what I look for when I recruit people too. There's a great quote from Keith Raboy, who's actually one of our earliest investors back at Founders Fund. He's at Costa now. He talked about how when you talk to a founder, they need to be in the top 0.1% in some axes, right? Is it their intelligence? Is it their determination? Is it their cleverness? Is it their craftiness? You know, is it their salesmanship? Is it their, determination? Whatever. They need to be the top 0.1% of something. So I think under that framework, if you talk to someone, you can very quickly, especially if you do it quite a bit, you can get very quickly a sense of if they are the best of the best. And so that is what a good investor will identify. And as such, in a way, because, they're investing in the founder, it's the least riskiest bet in the world, in a way. So that's how I think about it.
I've had the chance, like I said, to interview over 100 people, and I would be hard pressed to find a founder that is more passionate than you.
Thank you.
Like, just in our conversation right now, you can feel the energy and the excitement that you have talking about these things. And even in a question like that, where I like to ask a question like that because, one, it's good for the younger founder or the wannabe founder to hear, but it's hard to talk about yourself. It's challenging to talk about yourself personally. You didn't even flinch and you delivered a fantastic answer. And one, it has to do with you pitched yourself a ton. So obviously that is a skill that you're going to build. But two, it speaks to, in my opinion, this journey that you've been on, that you've just been building up and setting yourself up for these moments in success. And it comes with you just going head first into
Yeah.
this awesome passion. And now, 5 years later, you've built this amazing product, which I want to talk a little bit more about so that the people listening and watching can understand. Speaking, like if I went on ChatGPT and I said, explain Nucleus to a 5-year-old, what would be your best pitch?
To a 5-year-old? Is that the audience? 5? 5 is young. I would say if it's that young, which maybe we should start there, I would say something like, your DNA is the language of life. It's the foundation of who you are. We all know that, right? We get DNA from mom and dad. We come from DNA. It's like our source code. A lot of genetic tests historically would focus on ancestry, but it turns out that genetics, or DNA, is actually the highest density piece of health information in the world. In other words, your DNA impacts your individual disease risks, right? Cancers, diabetes, neuropsychiatric diseases like schizophrenia. It impacts your family planning, so it helps you have healthy children. It tells you what drugs you metabolize better and worse, so you can get the right dosage. In other words, it's such a valuable piece of health data that can profoundly increase your longevity and help you stave off disease. And so historically, if you actually looked at how much did it cost to read all of someone's DNA, right? So the first step before you can analyze DNA is you have to read the DNA. And if your DNA is 1,000-page book, to read all 1,000 pages, it costs $100 million per sample. So to read Andreas's DNA, it would cost $100 million, right? So obviously it's way too expensive. And because of that, how could I possibly give him so much of these profound health insights? I couldn't. So old companies, what they would do is they would look at one page out of the 1,000 and give you a very small read of your DNA. Fortunately, that cost has come down dramatically. It's from $100 million to now we just offered for a couple $100. And because of that, it's possible to read all 1,000 pages and therefore give people the most comprehensive assessment of their risk for disease that's ever been available. Said differently, because it was so expensive, what genetic testing used to do is they used to say, you know what, we don't want to look at all 1,000 pages. Let's look at one page. Then a different genetic test will look at another page. Then yet another genetic test looks at another page. So that's why there's actually 70,000 genetic tests today on the market. We combine all 70,000 tests into just one. That's the power of what we're doing.
And what has been the driving factor to reduce this cost exponentially, which is clearly the outlier here and the reason you're able to win?
Massive parallel automation and the wonders of compute. Everything's getting cheaper. So one way of thinking about sequencing is like, okay, back in the day, literally, if I wanted to sequence someone's DNA, I couldn't read all the DNA. I could only sequence a very small bit of it. So someone would literally go to a lab, they would take a pipette, and they would basically manually put in all these different kind of reagents, write these chemicals in, and then they would basically get this like small readout of DNA. In other words, it was a very slow, arduous manual process, and super low throughput. So like I could only do like that. I could also have like one person at a time doing it. What happened over time is that process became one automated, and then it became massively parallel. So instead of one person manually doing this, you basically have a machine doing this, and you have it doing a million times over. So that's why eventually the cost just came plummeting down. Also, some of the algorithms became cheaper, etc. So all in all, the fundamental catalyst for Nucleus is one of the greatest technological decreases in cost ever, which is really important because it answers the why now question very profoundly. Well, oftentimes, if I was, and if I was looking to work at a startup, if I was startup, prospective startup employee, what I would really evaluate in what the founder is telling me, amongst many things, what I'd really evaluate is the why now. And I would wager, unless it's like OpenAI, you cannot find a company, you cannot find a startup today in Silicon Valley that has as profoundly strong as a why now as we do. Because we are talking about one of the greatest decreases in cost ever, and we're the only startup that's actually building the space. Imagine if you were the AI company, actually you were OpenAI, and no one knows what LLMs are. You're the first one, right? Imagine before the gold rush. Before it's funny actually. I sometimes get texts from people, and they actually pitch me Nucleus. And it's funny because I don't think they realize it, but they pitch me Nucleus. It might sound strange, to texting me this, but they don't realize that they're pitching me Nucleus. And I'm like, wow, they're 5 years late, you know? And they're,
5 years.
yeah. And I'm thinking to myself sometimes, I'm like, it's kind of like, again, OpenAI is a great example of this. It's like, they were tinkering with LLMs, years ago before anyone. And now everyone's like AI, 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 AI. People didn't even know the word AI, freaking 2 years ago. And so what's interesting to me is always this idea of like, how do you get alpha in a world where once it's priced in and you've heard of it, you can assume someone else is making money off of it. So if I was a young founder in this podcast, I would really think about that. Don't follow the trends. It's kind of like, one analogy I like to use here is think about if you're eating food, white bread. White bread, when they take the wheat, they strip all the nutrients from it. So it's just super easy to digest, but it's not good for you. Right? We all know that. Whole wheat bread, right, has a lot of the wheat still on there, right? A lot of the nutrients are still on there, but it's a little bit harder to digest. I think often what happens is by the time you're receiving information, it's been stripped away of all the nutrients, so it's as easy as possible to digest. So when you're on Twitter or X, when you're on Facebook, not that anyone uses Facebook anymore, when you're on TikTok, hopefully it continues to stay unbanned, lol. When you're on, whatever, Instagram, when you're on these different social media platforms, even when you read the New York Times or something, if people still read the New York Times, if I look at all my, contingency statements here, but, if you're reading some media outlet, by the time that information comes to you, it's actually already priced in. And so you need to go, so one good heuristic, I think, always for potential founders is you feel like you're in a secret. You sort of pause and you look around and you say, how does no one else in the world know about this? It feels almost strange. You're in some weird niche internet community. That's always a good sign. Some weird, super random website no one's ever heard of. Okay. That's when you know you're onto something. I gave this example on another podcast one time where actually in the history of my life, if I look back on it, I was sort of on the cusp of different multi-billion dollar, multi-even trillion dollar enterprises, just from following curiosity. But I never pursue them. And this is not something I hear founders talk a lot, but so I'm going to give this anecdote. In high school, I was part of the stock and finance club because I wasn't just interested in genetics. I was interested in, stocks and, how do I, buy this? I have business basically, it was probably the closest thing I could to get like, what is business? Oh, it's stocks. Okay, let me go look into stocks. It seems interesting. I remember one day I went to this classroom. Okay, there was, I think, two other people that day in the club, and they were on their computers. Okay, and me being me, shameless as I am, I go up to them and say, "What are you doing?" And they say, "Oh, we're trading." I said, "Okay, cool. What stocks are you buying?" He says, "Not stocks." Excuse me? What do you mean it's not stocks? We're trading this thing called crypto. Crypto? What the fuck is that? It's this like internet money thing. Internet money? What the hell are these lunatics talking about? Internet money. Don't forget now. Think about this. Okay, this is probably 2016. Okay, I don't know what Bitcoin is priced at, but it's cheap. All right, it's cheap. 2016. Come on now. You could buy it. Like, you could buy it. It's probably for like $10 or something. Actually, I don't know if it's that cheap, but you could buy it. It was cheap. And I remember thinking to myself, these guys are, and they were actually buying not just Bitcoin, they were actually buying all sorts of really like arcane, like crypto. And then they would like, it would price it like 0.00000001 or something. And if it increased them by like whatever, 0.000005 or something, they made like $1 bajillion. Like it was like some really weird, like scammy kind of crypto trading thing they did. And, think about this. Think about like my life here. I wasn't very interested in it. So I said, oh, these guys are, stupid, whatever, which, it's funny because, one of them actually became a founder, interesting enough. But anyways, I said, these guys are stupid. This isn't going to go anywhere. But imagine if, Andreas, in that moment, I said, just like I did with CRISPR, right? I said, you know what? Let me get in here. Let me see what this is about. I'm interested. Let me tell you, I'd have a lot more money. I'd have a lot more money. Well. I would have field day. Oh my God, field day. Yeah. But guess what? I'm not interested in that. Even if I had $100 million now, I'd be doing what I'm doing now anyways. It doesn't really matter to me. That's one example. So in a weird way, I stumbled upon something. And I make these examples very particular to this audience because this is very important. The wonders of the universe are much closer than you think if you just pay attention. You actually find these little pockets of innovation and these pockets of opportunities if you bother to pay attention, even the age, or should I say, especially the age of AI. You might think, okay, he gave crypto as an example, but what else? What other examples are there? All right, let's go right now. 2016, or was it 2016 election? Let me just think for a second. Definitely 2020 election. Probably 2016, I think too. Yep, 2016 election. Multiple elections actually. So it was 2020 election. I also did it before. There was a website. The website was called Predicted. Predicted is a website where you can trade on gambling. Yeah, excuse me. You can trade on politics. You can trade on who wins. You might know this site. As you can see, I'm not just interested in genetics. I was interested in gambling and stocks and finance. So, everything here is Nucleus, right? It's kind of my loves of both genetics and biology, but also kind of, business really. It's my marriage of my two. It's craftsmanship, business and genetics, science. I mean, the business of science. I mean, that's literally my soul. It's my love. Anyway, so I was training on Predicted, and what's interesting is, again, following my curiosity. I want to gamble. I like gambling. So I go and I think, oh, I can gamble on the presidential election. And this is like, let's say 2016, right? This is back in the day now. Now there's, well, actually, before I get there, this is gambling. I go and I'm like, this is weird. How does no one know about this? You can trade on the election? Is that even legal? Then I was like, and by the way, it's weird that they're like, oh, we have an exemption that we're allowed. Predicted as this weird exemption with the law that they're allowed to actually buy these smart contracts up to $800 or something. So it was all weird. It felt like a niche thing. And I remember all the market prices were out of whack, right? So I remember in 2020 when Biden ended up obviously winning. That was 2020, I think. Yeah. I remember Biden was trading at like 3 cents after he had, lost Idaho, I think, or something, if I remember correctly. And I remember looking at the polls and I knew Biden was going to smoke everyone. And I was like, these morons on Predicted, they don't even know what the hell they're doing. And I actually bought Biden at 3 cents. That trade did very well. I should have actually kept it all the way to the election day, though. That was my mistake. But that's besides the point. And so I remember doing all of this, playing all these things, just kind of, shooting the shit. And then in this year, 2024, I was like, wait a second. Kalshi, Polymarket. You're talking about massive, multi, at least hundreds of $1 million. Polymarket might be even bigger. Businesses built around gambling and of the election, and in fact, it became the zeitgeist. Oh, this is the news. Polymarket's the news. Oh, Kalshi's the news, right? Homie, I was doing this 8 years ago. Homie, I see people on Twitter saying, "Oh, this is so cool. This is like a new paradigm." What? I was doing this 8 years ago in my freaking bedroom. I was gambling on who's going to win the election. But notice, that's so interesting. Imagine I was a little bit more curious. I would have said, which is honestly, retrospectively, I'm a bit surprised I didn't look into this more. But again, I like genetics more. So what can you do? I would have said, you know what? It's kind of weird that this isn't bigger. I would think, people gamble on sports all the time. Why would gambling on election, if this company can do it, which God knows what this company even is? No one's even heard of this company. Why don't I make a startup that does this? Right? Obvious idea. It was right there. Crypto was right there. Gambling was right there on political on the election. But it wasn't for me. It wasn't meant for me. That wasn't my journey. It wasn't the thing I wanted to do. I actually would kind of be in the way when you know something's not right. You always know. You kind of feel you do it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel as good as it could. This ain't right. And maybe you can do things that don't feel right for some time. You can, but it doesn't feel right. Nucleus feels perfectly right. It's aligned to the soul. And so, what's my point? My point is that you need to remember that have smart friends. That's always helpful, but also follow your curiosity. Go to the corners of the internet. Go to the places that no one else is, that no one else knows. And then in doing that, you do something remarkable, which is you're actually at the frontier. And in the same way, people, in the 1800s went west and they had manifest destiny and they took over the United States, all the way to California. In the same way, you're doing your own intellectual manifest destiny. That's what you want. So follow your bliss. That's all.
I think you passing on those opportunities will be the reason why Nucleus is a $1 trillion company down the road.
True.
And it's funny, you say you would be richer if you would have jumped into crypto now, but I am a huge advocate, and I say it all the time. The biggest disease young people have is being too short-sighted.
Agreed.
Not looking at things over a long period.
Agreed.
Everybody wants instant gratification in 30 to 60 days. You should be looking at things in 10 to 15 year periods, because that's going to allow you to actually identify what's the big winner. And I think for you, yes, you probably would add 100 million now, but we'll laugh about this in 15 years when you have $900 million or you're headed to be a billionaire because you stayed in your lane and built something you were actually passionate about,
100%.
actually going to drive.
And life is ultimately, it's about how happy you are. It's about, and happiness isn't, people always mistake happiness and joy. Sometimes you can be really, really miserable, but I can still be really happy. It happens all the time, actually. Well, I have a miserable day, 3 hours of sleep, 15 meetings. If, some problem happened and I'm in such a bad mood, but I'm happy, because happy is not an emotion. It's a state of being. And so what is that worth? What is that worth?
An infinite amount of
exactly,
money.
Right? Because okay, let's say you had $1 billion, you're unhappy. You probably trade all the money to be happy. I mean, what's the fucking point? It's like with health too. What's the point of having $1 billion if you're not healthy? There's no point in that. So I think that's the way I really think about it. And I think you're right that you have to take some longer term approach, but ultimately you have to do. Like, people over intellectualize so many things. I'm actually one of the most profound realizations I've had as a founder over these last couple of years is sort of the death of intellectualization. I think I used to probably take more pride in high school or college about kind of thinking and philosophizing and, spinning the wheels in my mind. After building something that, the intellect kind of hits the physical plane, you very quickly realize that intellectualizing is a fool man's errand. It is a fool's man's errand. Why? Because your mind's ultimately very finite. You can only build such a model of the world that ultimately will always pale in comparison to just the raw experience and digesting of the thing you're trying to learn. So unless you're an academic, which is a very specific function, you should always just do. And in doing, it'll produce more information, which will help you do more effectively. It's almost like this, almost like your own self-serving like function that lets you really learn so much faster. Meanwhile, if you can intellectualize for all of time, and the ideas never hit reality.
I am one of the people that falls into that trap of like sometimes I'm over analyzing situations, thinking about too many things. My best friend has a successful company, and the number one thing that I take from him and that I wish to be better at, he is the king of doing. The idea comes to his head, he just does it. Something comes, just do it. If it sucks, it sucks. Move on, do something else. And for me, and for anybody listening right now, I think that's so important because that ability allows you to fail fast. And talking to hundreds of founders, that's one of the number one ways they've been successful is they've failed quickly.
Yeah.
They've done things, iterated on that, and then built successful companies off that.
Oh yeah, this business is one where you fall flat on your face. That's the nature of this business. And you got to learn fast because, one thing that I think school teaches people really badly is it makes it seem as if mistakes are fatal, right? You get something wrong on a test, it's on your resume for the entire year. It brings down your average for the entire year, right? So there's this idea of almost like you make a mistake in some test or some assessment, and it's like this permanent stain on your record, right? For that, right? That's how it works. That's how school literally works. It's an average, so it's of everything. That's not how life works.
Not at all.
Life, you make a mistake, no one gives a fuck. You wake up and do something else the next day. That's it. Like there is no mistakes. There actually is no mistakes. You just tried. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. So people tend to have this like perverse idea of, oh my God, I made a mistake. What am I gonna do? It doesn't fucking matter. I've made a bajillion mistakes in my time, and a bajillion. Doesn't matter. There's no such thing as it. It's all in the mind, anyways. It's whatever you think it is. I get close to the truth. Oh, I get close to the truth. Okay, I get close to the truth. Right? You see me. One of the things that when my colleagues watch me work, it's try, go. Oh, failed. Okay, who cares? Okay, who cares? That's just it. In school, you're taught, oh my God, I made a mistake. They punish you for it. It's like something. It's like so you get nervous. I don't want to make a mistake. That's not real life. Jump in, start swimming. That's it.
That couldn't be better advice for the people listening right now. Before we get to the end of the conversation, I want to give you the chance to tell us what Nucleus looks like in 5 to 10 years if everything worked perfect, because I think that's an interesting question to ask.
I think there's two parts of Nucleus. One is I like to think of Nucleus. Yeah, one part is don't die, right? To take it from our dear friend Brian Johnson, which is hey, we build a real-time consumer-centric quantified health platform that integrates the entirety of your health data from your genetics, your blood, your urine analyses, your full body MRIs, everything. And we can actually flag prior to any obvious signal, right? Like a cough, like that, right? Prior to any phenotypic signal, you can actually molecularly flag the onset of disease, therefore preventing it, right? In other words, I know way before that a disease is going to happen, which lets us basically prevent it for every single person. And it's all real time. It's all software native. All this is going to be fed into an AI system. It's going to be extremely sophisticated. You own all your health data from your genome up. So in other words, you don't die. The software enables you not to die. Then there's other part of Nucleus, which is family planning, right? We're going to be building some very exciting stuff in this world where we can let people have healthy children. I think this is very powerful. It's been still underappreciated in genetics that you can basically integrate DNA with dating apps, and you can at scale actually weed out genetic markers that contribute to disease in children. And you can do that with no pipettes or anything. It's just multiplication. It's like Mendel's P's. If you remember that from high school, Mendel's P's. It's literally just Mendel's P's. You can use that integrated dating apps, and you can actually eliminate disease. And that's all, again, it's all software. So I think there's some really powerful ideas on Don't Die, and then what I call generational health, which is helping people not just have kids, but then after they have kids, tracking and monitoring the baby's health. In other words, you see how it's a kind of an intergenerational health platform. That's not $1 billion business, okay? That's $1 trillion business. And it's $1 trillion business because you give every single person in this country and around the world profound value. You're giving them health. And there's nothing is more valuable than health. So we spend $4 trillion a year. 4 trillion. 4 trillion. Where's that money going? $4 trillion a year on healthcare in this country. So imagine. It's massive.
I love both of those. I don't want to die, so I'm going to go ahead and order my kit when we
Fuck
jump
yeah.
off this call and start my process
do it.
of not dying. But dude, this has been one of my favorite conversations, and if
Thank
you
you.
watch my episodes, I do not say that at the end of every episode. I want to close it out with the last question I always ask is like, what would you tell the 18-year-old you with everything you know now?
Follow your bliss. You already know. Listen to that. Close your eyes. Listen to that. Don't let anything get in the way of that. That's it.
Kian, thank you so much for this conversation, sharing all of this. Where can people that are listening and still watching right now go and connect with you?
Yeah, we're on Twitter or X, Kian Sadeghi 5. We're on Instagram. We're also, I think that's the real Kian Sadeghi. LinkedIn, obviously. We also have a podcast. It's called High Alchemy with Kian Sadeghi. I think you should check that out. And then, mynucleus.com if you wanna not die, that's where you can go. Yeah, that's our stuff.
Awesome. And for everybody listening and watching, we'll have all of that information linked below. Kian, thank you so much again for your time. This has been an amazing conversation. I look forward to now getting to watch your journey from a little bit of a closer view. And I'm wishing you and your company nothing but success.
Thank you so much, Andres. Thank you so much for having me.
And everybody, thank you for being with us for this episode. That is the end of the pod, and we will see you on the next one.